Hey guys, Unused here, and today I wanted to make a video discussing the unused trial and case found in Danganronpa 1's game files. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video if you do enjoy it. That kind of stuff really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, so I very much appreciate it. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I've talked a lot about beta Danganronpa content before, like unused executions, distrust, etc. But did you know that there was actually an entire case and class trial that never made it to the official release? The case was an earlier idea for Chapter 1, and it involved Junko getting murdered by Leon instead of Mizuno. This case was surprisingly well fleshed out, with closing argument artwork, truth bullets, and even class trial footage. The closing argument images and truth bullets were found in the first game's files, and can be viewed on the cutting room floor. The footage from the class trial was released more recently by the Danganronpa creators in 2020 for the game's 10th anniversary celebration. A translated version of the trial footage was posted by the Danganronpa wiki on their YouTube channel, and the translated captions were made by Kamud Coutinho on Twitter. And I'm going to be referring to their translation throughout the video. If you look at the video, you can see there's a pretty big difference between this one and the final version we ended up with. Firstly, if you compare the two animation-wise, you'll notice some pretty big changes. The text circling around each character is much smaller and less distracting in the official version. The pans for the characters go much farther back in the official version too, making the courtroom feel a lot larger and more open. You can also see that some of the other assets are new or updated as well. Like for example, in the final version, Monokuma gets his own chair rather than just standing at the podium with the rest of the students, which I'm sure he appreciates. It also looks like the podiums that the students stand at were updated as well, since they look more textured and a lot less awkward. Next, I'd like to discuss the sprites, since they look pretty different too. Although the original appearance and clothes for the characters are mostly the same, if you compare the sprites side by side, you can see that they were actually entirely recreated. They're almost all in completely different poses, and looking through them more thoroughly, you can notice that the overall design is different stylistically as well. The older sprites are a lot more saturated, and they use sharper lines for the characters' features, such as their chin outline or waist. In my opinion, it makes them look a lot more cartoonish. In comparison, the official version looks much more toned down. Another interesting thing I noticed is that if you look at the old sprites found on the cutting room floor and compare those to the sprites used in the beta trial, you'll notice that it seems like they tried to tone down the saturation there too. The only character that maintains the same level of saturation is Monokuma. I'm thinking maybe to emphasize his cartoonish and over-the-top personality. I think this could have been one of the first steps that they took to try to make the characters appear more realistic. The most different looking characters, in my opinion, are Ishimaru and Kyoko. You can see Ishimaru rocking a black school uniform instead of a white one, which I gotta say, it looks good on him. And then you can also see that Kirigiri looks a lot more thin in this version, and this was another one of the aspects I thought was much more cartoonish looking in the older version. Getting back to the trial though, it starts out with the same exchange that happened in Danganronpa 1, where Ishimaru commands everyone to close their eyes, and for only the killer to raise their hand. Mondo responds in the same way too, calling him a dumbass for this idea. After that is when the content changes, since they begin discussing this unreleased case. Unfortunately, the case was edited down heavily for the stream, so we can't watch the entire thing, but I think we can deduce what happened based on the information that is shown in the trial, especially when you compare it to the truth bullets found in the game's files. The Monokuma file for the case states the following: victim, Junko Onishima, time of death between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. The corpse was discovered in classroom 1B on the first floor of the school zone. The other evidence is cleaning supplies, map of the scene, shattered vase, Mizuno's testimony, and Kirigiri's testimony. In the closing argument, we get a play-by-play of how the murder took place, although it is a bit vague, which makes it slightly confusing, so I'm going to try to do my best to explain those parts as best as I can. In the first slide, we see the culprit, Leon, breaking vases and then cleaning up the pieces with a blue dustpan. The next slide shows him traveling to classroom 3-2 while Mizuno watches him sneakily from the corner. Also, for some reason, the classroom names in the truth bullets do not match up with the names in the closing argument images. I'm guessing it might be because the game was still in development, so they changed the classroom names a couple times while creating this trial, but that's just my personal guess. As for why exactly it was 3-2, I'm unsure. This would imply to me that the murder took place on the 3rd floor, but it is confirmed from the trial footage that this is the first chapter, so I wonder if, like in really early versions of the game, maybe all the floors were open immediately at the start, or maybe at least like the first 3 floors were. But this is just all my speculation. Let me know what you guys think. I just thought it was kind of interesting that the closing argument implied that it was on the 3rd floor. But looking back at the truth bullets and the closing argument, I'm going to to assume that 1B from the evidence is the same as 3-2 in the closing argument, since they both appear to be where the murder took place. And then, officially getting back to the closing argument, the next slide is one of the ones that is the most confusing to me, and it's the one where we see Junko's bloody body lying on the floor while the culprit is standing over her with a knife. The evidence you're supposed to plug in is the clock stating that it's 10 a.m., and this is the start of the time frame that the Monokuma file said her time of death was in. So it appears that he killed Junko in class 3-2, aka 1B, and it seems like a pretty random place to just be at, so I'm guessing they maybe planned on meeting there for a private discussion of some sort, but that's just my speculation. Next we see that he used the broken vase shards from the first area and poured them onto Junko's body. I'm guessing that he did this so that it would appear as if one of the broken shards was what was used to stab her, rather than the actual murder weapon, which is the knife that we see in the third slide. After this, he heads to class 3-4. I have no idea where this classroom would be on the final map, as there's only 2 classrooms on the first floor, and there's no 3D on the third floor, which is how I assume it would have been labeled if it made it to the final version. So I think this could have been a location that was just scrapped altogether, but just wanted to include that as a side note. Moving on, he enters this mysterious class 3-4 and breaks yet another vase, very dramatically, I'd like to add. It looks like he's doing like a JoJo pose or something. Based on the closing argument slide, it appears that he moved to this classroom and waited until 12 p.m. purposefully so that he could be overheard breaking a vase by one of the other students, in this case Hifumi. It took me a while to figure out what I think he was going for by doing this. I think he decided to break the vase in 3-4 at 12 p.m. to firstly convince the other students that the murder took place at 12 rather than 10, and I think since they'll likely go to 3-4 first and then find Junko's body afterwards in 3-2, aka 1B, this setup makes it seem as though the struggle started in 3-4 and eventually moved to 3-2. So basically, I think his plan was just to confuse the students by making it seem like an entirely different struggle took place. I think he was hoping by setting it up this way, they would only investigate those 2 classrooms and not investigate the other classroom where he broke the first vase that he like intended to cover up and used for the murder. It still doesn't really seem like a super great plan to me personally though, since he still doesn't have an alibi for 12 p.m. when the vase that alerted the others was broken. Also, when the students rush over there, I'm unsure if he was planning on hiding in a locker or if he thought he could make it out of the room before they came over. Overall, it just doesn't really seem like super solid reasoning, but this was the most sense I can make out of this panel. So let me know if you guys think he was trying to accomplish something else here, or if you think he had a better plan to avoid suspicion. And that is unfortunately where the closing argument ends. It's pretty abrupt. In this beta trial, he comes out of the gate almost immediately accusing Mizuno of committing the murder, stating that she must have done it since they were so buddy-buddy. And I'm not sure how he planned on framing Mizuno, since there's no evidence presented like whatsoever that makes it look like she's the culprit. Granted, that part could have been edited out, but from what I've seen, there's not really any evidence to frame her. So granted, I don't have the full context of this murder, but from what I've seen, this was not a super good plan at all. His plan in Danganronpa 1 wasn't really good either. I think one of the main roadblocks for the group to overcome was the fact that it was committed in Nagi's room, since this led almost all of them besides Kirigiri to assume that Nagi must have done it. And although Leon utilized this and blamed Nagi as much as he could, it wasn't even Leon's idea or doing, and was instead Mizuno's, since originally she wanted to frame Makoto for Leon's death. In Danganronpa 1, I assumed that Leon's plan was badly made, since he had to come up with it on the spot, since it was Mizuno who premeditated killing him. But after looking at this case too, I'm kind of wondering if maybe he just isn't all that bright.
You're stupid! Stupid, stupid, stupid! Stupid, 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 stupid!
The only alternative explanation I can come up with is that Junko originally was the one to lure him to the classroom through like a note or something maybe, and she was originally planning on killing him. But since we see him preparing the vase before the murder, then that would mean that he somehow realized that she was planning to kill him first, which I have absolutely no evidence for. Even with that being the case, I do want to expand on this idea later for fun in the video, so please look forward to that. But getting back to the trial, I want to discuss a bit more about how I think it played out. It seems like they were able to pinpoint Leon as the culprit through witness testimonies and comparing the times in which everything took place. According to the truth bullets, they were able to deduce that a small shard of glass found in the blue dustpan was the same as the one found at the crime scene. This combined with Mizuno's testimony was likely what allowed them to realize that he had used the glass shards to cover up the true murder weapon. This also proves premeditation before committing the crime as well, so they'd be able to call him out on his BS if he tries to state that he killed her in self-defense, like what he did at the end of Danganronpa 1's class trial. Based on the very little content we know about this trial, it seems very short compared to the canon ones. There's only 6 truth bullets, and the closing argument, which is usually at least 10 panels, is instead only 5. The test appears to show all the gameplay for the closing argument minigame as well, since we see the player opening it up, and we even see Naigi's animation after the 4th panel, making it seem like, yeah, this is basically all of it. I think the reason as to why this trial seems so rushed in comparison to the canon ones could be because this was only made as a test to present to the higher-ups during development. I think that they could have written an entire chapter based around this case, but only drew, animated, and finalized part of the trial, just in order to show their progress to management. This idea is also supported by what Terasawa says in the 10th anniversary stream. He states, "At the time this video was made, we hadn't done anything in development. We squeezed it out just to have something to present." Another interesting thing about this trial is that it makes you wonder whether or not it was Makuro or Junko that Leon killed, and was this created before they decided that Junko was the mastermind? Based on the image of her in the closing argument, you really can't argue too much since you can't see her all that well. The only super notable thing I saw was that she has bunny hairpins on instead of bear ones, which resembles Makuro's hairpins more than Junko's. If you look at Junko's beta designs, you'll see that in almost all of her sketches, she was already in Monokuma-themed mastermind attire. She's wearing the Monokuma clip-on hairpin, among other things, so I'd say they likely decided to make her the mastermind pretty early on. Also, these 2 designs in particular remind me of how the characters are drawn stylistically in the beta trial as well, so I think it's highly likely that she was already planned to be the mastermind during the production of this test. Because of this, I think it was Makuro that Leon killed instead of Junko, and this idea of it being Makuro disguised as Junko connects the other idea I mentioned earlier. What if Makuro was planning on killing Leon first, and he somehow found out about it? As for how this entire case plays out in my brain, I'd like to present it via my very own closing argument. And also, just to clarify, I can't prove this is 100% how they intended for the trial to play out. It's merely just my interpretation based on what I know. I highly doubt this is exactly how they meant for it to go, but regardless, it's fun to speculate. So yeah, let's go ahead and do it! The chapter starts out and the mastermind, Junko Enoshima, orders her sister Makuro Ikasaba, disguised as her, to commit the first murder in order to get the killing game started. Junko specifically wants her to target Leon too. She assures Makuro as well that once she gets to the trial and execution, Junko will fake the execution, therefore allowing Makuro to survive and run the rest of the killing game with her, hidden in the school. Makuro agrees to this plan wholeheartedly, but little does she know that Junko has other ideas. Once Junko gets an idea of how Makuro's murder is supposed to play out based on the surveillance footage, she decides to give a hint to Makuro's target, Leon. A simple note that states, "Junko is planning to kill you." Leon sees this and then freaks out at first. He's terrified, but then once Makuro, disguised as Junko, invites him to have a private discussion, he begins to think to himself, does he really want to not attend and then spend the rest of his time here in fear that this girl is going to eventually catch him off guard and kill him? Or should he instead catch her off guard during this secret little meeting that they planned out? And that's when he sets his plan into motion. He breaks a vase in the first room, cleans up the pieces, and brings it to classroom 3-2, where they were planning to meet at. Then before she's able to attack, he overpowers her with a knife he has hidden on his body. Then he pours the broken shards over her in order to frame this as the murder weapon. After this, he escapes to a different classroom and breaks yet another vase at 12 p.m. That way the students will overhear him and run to the classrooms. They'll find the broken glass in classroom 3-4, and then eventually find the body in 3-2. The culprit will think they've successfully tricked the students into thinking the actual time of death was 12 p.m. and that there was a struggle that started in 3-4. This was the culprit's plan. Overall, I'm glad they changed this trial, although I do cringe a bit at the 11037 clue in the first trial and how a lot of streamers and Let's Players get it like immediately. I still overall think the first chapter in Danganronpa 1 is a fun mystery to start the game out with. I like how it subverts your expectations by making Mizuno, who appears to be like the best girl, the first one to die, and someone who is actually planning on framing you for murder. And even though the mystery isn't the strongest compared to other trials, I still think it does a good job of setting up the story and the atmosphere that you can't trust anybody or get attached to the other characters. As for this beta trial, it's hard to give my full opinion since I'm just creating a scenario off of the very little information that we have. I do think that there is a very good chance that there's more to the story than what's publicly available, but based on what I've seen and come up with, I do think the first trial in Danganronpa 1 is stronger. I also think it was a really good call for them to change it to where Monokuma directly kills Makuro instead of it being Leon killing her. I don't know if my theory was right about Junko manipulating the whole situation to where Makuro dies, but even so, I think the way that they did it in Danganronpa 1 was probably better than doing it the way that I came up with, since I feel like it's just really powerful to watch Makuro realize in her final moments that she was betrayed by her sister that she dedicated her whole life to. And I don't think the scenario I came up with where Junko kills her more indirectly through Leon would show like that much betrayal in her eyes. I feel like she might not fully realize in the moment like she does in Danganronpa 1. So I do think overall this was a better direction to go into. I think that scene does a really good job of showing Junko's obsession with despair and how she's willing to kill even those closest to her in order to experience it. But regardless, I do think it's still fun to look at this case and trial and speculate on what could have been. But anyways, I would love to know what you guys think. Do you think you might have preferred this trial over Danganronpa 1's canon case? Or do you agree with me that the Danganronpa 1 case seems to be a little bit stronger? And what do you think of the scenario I created? Do you think it would have played out like this, or do you have any ideas of your own? Like I said, this was the best scenario that I think I can come up with to explain it, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section. I really enjoyed a lot of the scenarios you guys came up with for the Danganronpa Alternate Mastermind series, so I have a feeling there will be some really interesting scenarios in the comment section, so please leave those if you have anything in mind. I would love to read it. I think it's so fun to speculate about this stuff too. Another idea I thought could be fun is coming up with some AU scenarios based on the screenshots from Distrust, Danganronpa's original concept. I've always been really interested in making more videos about it, and I think it could be fun to come up with scenarios based on what we know about the game. Also, there's a decent amount of screenshots to come up with scenarios for, like for example one where Kirigiri appears to be the first victim. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of that idea as well. But yeah, thanks guys for watching this video. Please do leave a like and a comment and share if you did enjoy it. And yeah, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. And once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you real soon.